So I'm a bit of a nerd, okay? So I did some nerdy stuff with the papers in terms of analysing them. And this was the first thing I tried. I said, well, what do all the paper titles tell us about design management? And there's lots of these pictures coming up, so I'll prepare you for that. So this is 2011, so I've got the date up here. And these are all of the words, so when all the paper titles are put together, all of the words as a word cloud that tells us something about the field. So what came up? Service, innovation, management, unsurprisingly, designing. I think for this word cloud, I took out the word design because it was too big. It would have confused everything. What else do we have in here? Product being quite big, systems, framework being quite big, service, innovation, sustainable, and then a lot of little words around the peripheries. That tells us something. What does it look like for 2013? I think I left in design this time, just to give you a comparison that shows that design actually is quite big, as you might expect in a design management conference. Some similarities. Product, again, being quite big. Strategic. Management, again, being quite a big thing. Service. Innovation, development. There's some interesting things that aren't very big here. I was surprised that sustainable or sustainability didn't appear as a bigger thing. I was surprised that the word thinking didn't appear as a bigger thing, because I'd have thought that might have appeared in the titles. And some consistency between the two. So that was my start point, paper titles, but I thought, well, maybe the paper titles don't tell us everything. Maybe we need a bit more depth. So I looked at the keywords. So all the papers choose keywords. The authors choose their own, so there's no prescription of keywords that they select from. So they can select whatever keyword phrases they like, and these are phrases. Clearly you can't read that one, nor can I know what it says. Applied design management in healthcare medical industries is somebody's choice of a phrase for a keyword there. So again, 2011, design management, unsurprisingly dominant. We've got service design, product service systems, innovation, design process, strategic design. Design thinking appears quite little down here. We've got product design over there, new product development. I think what surprised me about this is it seems quite product-centric, perhaps more than service-centric, but certainly product-centric. So they're keyword phrases, 2011, 2013. Again, design management figures large. Strategy, new product development, strategic design, service design. Oh, there we get design thinking. So although it's not in the titles, people are putting design thinking as a topic in the keywords. What else do we have? Oh, same keywords, but this time without design management. So to try and take out that heavily dominant thing sitting in the middle to see what people are talking about. So product service systems, innovation, service design. So that's quite striking, I think, from 2011, that when we get into the detail a bit, we start to see things like service design appearing. What I think's quite interesting about that, as if you stand back from it, is a few things very dominant, but a lot of things at a fairly flatly equal level. In other words, we're addressing a very wide span of stuff and not having a single core of stuff that's really dominant in a significant way. And maybe that reflects us as a discipline. I think it reflects what we saw at the conference the last few days, that we actually got a very broad range of interests, and the field is, by its very nature, quite a diverse one. And that means diverse methods, diverse perspectives, and diverse interests. So service design, interesting that that is bigger than product design and even bigger than strategic design. And so there's an interesting question there for us as a domain when there are specialist service design conferences and a growing service design area in its own right. And what the overlap is with design management versus these new areas like service design. And lots of bits and pieces around the edges from, I don't know, medical device development, consultant-client relationships, technology adoption, brand styles, process design, design team roles, a really big variety. So the keywords, 2013, without design management in the keyword. So design thinking, a bit bigger, so something between 2011 and 2013 meant people wanted a bit more interest in design thinking. Strategic design, quite big strategy. Design theory, I was quite interested to see that one there. Design theory as a topic. Marketing strategy, etc. So keywords. Now, being a real nerd, I put all of the papers into one whopping great file and put all of the words in all of the papers into a word cloud. All right, so this was a particularly tedious activity. Now, you can clearly see that the word used most in all of the papers was design. I quite like et and al as two words being used quite frequently. What else have we got? Case, development, research, product management, service process. I'm not quite sure this tells us anything new compared with the keywords, but it's quite good fun. And there's a lot of words that go into that particular word cloud. That was 2011. 2013, again, a similar kind of picture. Management, product, innovation, development, research, process. I think we have a very similar pattern. So actually, the more words we get, we start to say, well, actually, we've got some consistency, which maybe isn't surprising. So there's kind of the ideas and topics in the papers. I also did some analysis of the material that was cited. So this is where my nerdiness went into overdrive, and I took out from all of the papers all of the references, put them into a spreadsheet, chopped up the references into authors, years, publications, whatever it is, sorted them all, counted them all, and then did some word clouds on stuff and some analysis. So the first bit of analysis was to say, well, what's the time period of stuff that's being cited? In other words, as a domain, as a discipline, are we citing stuff that's very young, or are we going back to old material? And, well, you can see the pattern. So then we've got journals, conferences, books, web, or other. So some stuff from before the 70s, a bit of a growth. The 90s where things start to get a bit more active, and then we're actually referencing a majority of our work from the 2000s. Again, we can have a discussion about this. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means we are ignoring all of this stuff to our peril, or whether it means that all the good work that needs to be cited is only very recent. And a dominance of journals and books rather than conferences. And 2010s is too young to yet be figuring too significantly. So here's, for 2011, I didn't do this particular path for 2013, but for 2011's conference, the journals being referenced by decade. Okay? So this is the journals being referenced from the 1970s. So the design journal being the main one, and then an interesting collection of others: management science, psychological review, experimental psychology, accounting. And again, it's fascinating for us as a field what an eclectic set that is, from design to psychology to accounting to hardcore management and business. That's before the 1970s. From the 1970s, a different set of journals, Journal of Marketing now being dominant, so design management seemingly being something that we're looking at from a marketing perspective, with sociology, HBR appearing on the scene, Academy Management Review, and ASQ. And they're very much looking at the more managerial side of the world. The 1980s, so work being referenced from the 1980s seems to be dominated by now the design side of the world, so design studies. And this thingy appearing, Journal of Product Innovation Management. So is design management about product development and product development management? You know, these seem to be suggesting that we're in a producty territory. Some other ones: Harvard Business Review growing a wee bit, Journal of Marketing, Journal of Business Strategy. And 1990s, what you instantly observe is there are more. So I think we all recognise this, the growth of the number of journals, the growth of the number of papers. It seems to be an ever-expanding system. So there are far more, but actually some different emphasis. So Harvard's Business Review growing, Journal of Product Innovation Management, and interestingly, the Design Management Journal making its first appearance in the top 10. And Design Studies, and actually a whole range of other journals being referenced in a lesser way. Again, this perhaps suggests that we are, I think I described to somebody at the conference, almost like magpies as a field. We'll pick from anywhere the stuff that we want and the stuff that we're interested in. But interesting here that we've got essentially product development, design management, design and business as the core things that we're sitting in between. From the 2000s, and this is the one I think almost is most interesting, the dominant journal by a very long way is JPIM, Journal of Product Innovation Management, and the design management ones less so. Really, I think reflecting perhaps a view at that time and the things we're looking at as being about product development. Stays the same for 2010s, although we get many more journals, whether they're Innovation Management, Harvard's Business Review, Journal of Service Research, Design Issues, Craft Research, etc. But JPIM dominant. And this is, and I apologise for the smallness of the words, I don't expect you to read the little ones, but this is the map for 2011 for all of the references from journals in all of the papers, and the single dominant journal that comes out of that is JPIM. That's the one we seem to be looking to most when we are writing our papers, with Design Management Journal next, then Design Studies and HBR. I don't know if that's a surprise to anybody. I'm not sure it is a surprise, but again, maybe it's just my nerdiness that finds it quite interesting. But it certainly, I think, tells us something about the field we're in. I made an attempt at saying what are the domains of all of those journals. I'm not sure this was particularly scientific or accurate, but we can see that we have this eclectic mix from design to marketing to business to innovation. Now this was, I did the same thing for 2013, slightly different presentation. I thought a graph would make a change from a word cloud. So here we have the number of times each journal has been cited, and this is again for all of the papers. So 2013, JPIM cited just over 50 times for all of the papers, followed by Journal of Marketing, Design Issues, Design Studies, Design Management Journal just over 20 times. And then we've got an interesting set up to about here of journals that are, again, show the diversity of this field from things like strategic management, academia management, business strategy, HBR, marketing management, business research, very businessy journals, consumer research, marketing, organization science, and then research policy and technovation. So drawing very much on the management fields when you put all those together. So the journals we reference, what else can we find out? I then did the same with all the authors that are being referenced. So these are the authors being referenced. This is 2011. So these are the authors being referenced from before the 1970s. So you've got an interesting set here, I think, and you'll hopefully recognize the dominant ones: Simon, Farr, Polanyi, Penrose, etc. So that's who we look to from before the 1970s. I guess they're providing us with the bedrock of whatever we do. From the 2013, same thing, pre-1970s. Same people, Polanyi, Dewey making an appearance there, Simon again, and a whole range of others. 2011, from the 1970s. So these are authors who are writing in the 1970s who we reference today. Alan Topalian, Alexander, Jones, and Rittle probably being the dominant ones. That was the 2011 papers. 2013, actually a slightly bigger set, don't know why that is, and slightly different names. Rittle being common, I think. Rittle, yes. Then we've got Chakrabarty, Robert Cooper making an appearance. I'm going to ask you at this point. No, that's R.G. R.G. Cooper, not R. Cooper. Okay, I'm going to ask you when I get to the end of this, who do you think the authors are that we reference most when I do the authors for all decades? Simon? Any other guesses? Nobody want to risk it? No? I'll pause. One more name. Brigitte? Okay. So that was 70s. So from the 80s, the people we cite, this is our 2011 conference. So again, this is R.G. Cooper, Robert Cooper and partner Kleinschmidt. Philip Kotler makes an appearance, von Hippel, Dumas. So again, an interesting set of people. And from the 80s for the 2013 conference, almost the same names. Donald Schoen making an appearance this time, whereas I don't think he made, oh he did, sorry, not, slightly lesser so in 2011. But R.G. Cooper dominant. Again, this is really interesting. Who do we look to the most from that decade? R.G. Cooper. In the 1990s, this is where you have R. Cooper as opposed to R.G. Cooper. And Margaret Bruce, Vivian Walsh, Robin Roy, Brigitte Yevnaker, etc., Mike Press. From the 2011 conference, 2013, the same names, R.G. and R. Cooper, Elko Kleinschmidt, again making a big appearance. Into the 2000s, and here we have Brigitte Borges-Mazzotta as being our biggest person that we cite. Roberto, interestingly, Tim Brown, yes, being someone we look to, and who else? I think there's a bit of an anomaly. My name appeared there because I had a few PhD students in the conference that year, and of course they were going to cite my work. So I'm not sure that's necessarily reflective of the domain properly. R.G. Cooper, perhaps slightly less so. It's interesting sort of here in terms of the entry and exit of different people that we're referencing. And also our memory of their work and you know, what we choose to look to. And from 2013, again, Brigitte makes she's here somewhere. Oh, she's gone. Oh, that's a shame. Margaret Bruce, etc. How long do I have? Am I running out of time? Okay. From the 2010s, I think this one's interesting because this is a snapshot into who we're going to be looking at over the next 10 years and who's up and coming. So this is where you want your name if you're working in the field now, isn't it, I guess? And of course, there's not yet any dominance of anybody, which is a good thing. Jean, your name's in there somewhere. Nigel Cross, Dirk Snelders, who else do we have? Tony Matty. So some good names in there. Croysen, and a slightly different set of names, interestingly. Tom Lockwood, Ulla, Jean again, Rachel Cooper, Roberto, and Jill Woodilla. So these are the people we're looking to cite. From 2011, this was all the papers. So the authors in all the papers. So good guess from the back. Brigitte is who we seem to be looking at most. Again, that's a decided anomaly. But Robert Cooper and Rachel Cooper, both the Coopers, are definitely people who are very influential. From 2013, I don't know why, but this was very much the Cooper and Kleinschmidt year, with Roberto, Vaganti, Brigitte, etc. And as a domain, that tells us that we're very much looking at these kind of people's work, you know, stage gate, systems, processes, product development, as the thing that maybe is an underpinning idea between a lot of, underneath a lot of what we do. Now this one's difficult because a lot of books were referenced and they have long titles, which means that the picture by default goes wide and it's very hard to capture all the books. So I don't expect you to read all of them, but there are a few books in there: Design Thinking, Why Design Thinking is the Next Competitive Advantage, Design Management, etc. And it's not very helpful, I don't think. Conferences referenced. I was very pleased in 2013 that CADMC was actually the conference that was most referenced with papers from 2011. That may be a good thing. It also may suggest that, again, we've got a short memory and we don't look to other conferences. Good test of your knowledge of conference acronyms. So we've got things like URAM, IDMRC, IPDMC, etc. I said, I'll let you go and work all of those out on your own. but an interesting mix of management conferences, engineering design conferences, design conferences, as well as specific design management conferences. I tried in 2011 to look at what we were doing in terms of research methods. So again, I read through all the papers, I attempted to say what kind of methods they were using, and listed them. And so in 2011, the thing we do most is interview, followed by in-depth case study, so a case study of one firm or one system or one organization, followed by some mixed stuff that is a collection of everything, followed by it's not really very clear what it is, and then a number of what would, for the good ones, be called theoretical or conceptual papers, for the less good ones be called opinion pieces. And then other things. What we do less is surveys, questionnaires, and actually surprisingly there were less action research-based projects, and that I would have thought we'd have done more action research, and few experiments, so controlled experiments of one sort or another. So, you know, set one design team doing something, another time design team doing something else, measure stuff, see what happens. For each of those different types of research, this was the average number of data points that people were collecting. So for the few surveys that we had, so about 6, an average number of data points of about 120. When we're doing interviews, an average number of fewer than 20. When we're doing case studies, or in-depth case studies, typically 1 or 2. And I think this is interesting for us as a field, and I said this to a few people at the conference over the last few days. I think typically we have small data sets. We don't do very much that deals with bigger data sets, and that might influence what we're able to say, the confidence we can say it with, and particularly the kind of journals we might get our work into. So small data sets. Maybe, and again, maybe that's a good thing, reflective of our discipline. And the weakest bit of my analysis was to try and say, well, what are the outputs that people produce? And it's actually quite hard to categorize the outputs that come from the papers. Some papers produce things like matrices. We do love a good 2x2 or 3x3 matrix for trying to explain the world. Almost always one corner works and another doesn't. Some people realize that and go for 3-dimensional ones because they're even more complicated. We like to try and produce things that show relationships or patterns between things, whether they're hierarchical or non-hierarchical or networky, but relationships and arrows, and they're always very interesting in terms of really understanding, well, what do those arrows mean, what do those relationships mean? Some papers try and describe patterns over time, so evolutions of stuff, what's happened in an organization over time, or with a project, or with a system, or with a process. And others try specifically to tease into the processes and articulate what those processes are, with a view that if we can articulate them, codify them, or maybe somebody else can repeat them. There were others that tried in some way to map something complicated, again, whether that was a network or, I don't know, I can't remember what these are to be honest, but mapping generally in its entirety, and a number trying to deliver tools or methods, so practical outputs aimed at making change. So a range of things, matrices, processes, relationships, patterns, maps, tools, methods, perhaps less in the way of theories, whatever that means, as opposed to these more practical outputs. So I'm nearly done. Some summaries. So of all of that lot, and when I look at paper titles, they were the things that came out most: service innovation, product development, and strategy. When I look at keywords chosen, innovation, service design, strategy, product service systems, design thinking, and design process. For journals, JPIM, Design Studies, Design Management Journal, and again, HPR, more management ones, and authors, well, I've listed all of those, but they are the people we look to most. Jean, you appear on the list at the bottom there, in our work. I think this is interesting because as a domain, one of our challenges is having an identity and a home. And for our work and for our discipline to have strength, I think we need that home to be one that we look to with some consistency. and other domains seem to do that somewhat better than we do. Or maybe we don't. Maybe it's a good thing that we are magpies and appear in management and design and innovation and all sorts of other journals. So there's a question for you, or just for a discussion point later. And my final bit of summary. If I look at the methods, we've got a range of methods from trying to understand something new. So it's a phenomenon we've not seen before in some way, with interviews or observation or case studies. Methods around trying to implement something, a new perspective or a new tool, or for testing a model, looking at relationships, or where we're looking at surveys, or maybe the conceptual papers that are more theorizing. I think that's me done, other than to say, stupidly, I've said I'll do it all again next year, which is good because it'll give me more data. And actually, I wouldn't mind having a go at doing this with the papers from this year, but it would mean I'd need them as Word format if you've got them, so that I can chop them up, but we can talk about that. Because I think, actually, this sort of analysis does, if we get enough of it, does tell us something interesting. So that's me done. Hopefully there will be some questions, maybe some comments, some of the more contentious ones. Thank you very much.